The woman laughed into her champagne glass, just loud enough for people nearby to hear. "I didn't know charity galas let people like this in." The man she was looking at didn't respond. He simply adjusted the cuff of his worn jacket, glanced around the room once, and stayed silent. No one rushed to defend him, because in rooms like this, silence was permission. Before we continue, take a quiet second with me. If stories about dignity, judgment, and hidden truths speak to you, tap like. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you enjoy calm, human stories like this, subscribe and stay with us. Now, let's go back to that room. Part 1. The gala was held in the East Atrium, a glass cathedral built to impress donors before they even opened their wallets. Light spilled from chandeliers designed to look accidental. Everything in the room had been chosen to suggest effortlessness, which was the most expensive illusion of all. Evan Hale stood near the back wall, hands folded loosely in front of him. He wore a dark jacket that had seen better years, pressed carefully but unmistakably older than the tailored suits around him. His shoes were clean, not new, clean. He had learned long ago that clean mattered more than flashy. He wasn't supposed to be here tonight, at least not in this way. Invitations had gone out weeks earlier, heavy paper, raised lettering, his name printed plainly, without a title. Evan Hale. No suffix, no company attached. He'd almost ignored it, assuming it was a mistake. Charity events usually didn't call him directly anymore. They spoke to assistants, boards, legal teams. But this one had felt different. The letter had mentioned the shelter, the outreach clinic, the work he'd funded quietly for years, the kind that didn't photograph well. He'd decided to attend, just once, not as a name, as a person. The woman who mocked him stood near the center of the room, surrounded by laughter. Clara Whitmore. Everyone knew her name. She was the kind of philanthropist whose generosity came with press releases and panels. Her donations were real. Her ego was louder. She had noticed Evan the moment he declined a server's offer of champagne, not because he refused, but because he did it politely, with eye contact, with thanks. That kind of calm often confused people who mistook noise for power. She drifted closer, looked him up and down, made her comment. Evan didn't flinch. He had been underestimated before, many times, usually by people who needed to believe they could identify worth at a glance. A man beside Clara chuckled. Another woman glanced away, uncomfortable but unwilling to interrupt. The band continued playing something soft and forgettable. Evan shifted his weight and looked toward the windows. The city glowed beyond the glass. This building had once been something else, a warehouse, cold, empty. He remembered walking through it years ago with an architect, boots echoing on concrete, imagining what it could become. Clara took his silence as confirmation. "You're with the staff, right?" she asked, not unkindly, which somehow made it worse. "Security or catering?" "No," Evan said. His voice was steady, not defensive, just factual. She raised her eyebrow. "Ah, a guests plus one, then?" "No." Now she laughed again, softer this time, amused. "Well, good for you. Sneaking in. It's a talent." Evan looked at her, really looked. He saw confidence built on applause. He saw someone used to rooms rearranging themselves for her comfort. He also saw something else. Fear. The kind that clings to status because it has nothing underneath. "I have an invitation," he said. She glanced at his hands, empty. "Of course you do." Across the room, a server hesitated. He recognized Evan, not personally, but by instruction. He almost stepped forward,
then stopped. This wasn't his moment to interrupt. The charity's executive director stood near the stage, rehearsing her speech. She kept glancing toward the back wall, searching for someone she hadn't yet spotted. Evan felt the familiar urge to leave. He could walk out, let the moment dissolve, let Clara keep her version of the story. He'd done that before, avoided scenes, avoided explanations. But something held him in place. Maybe it was the shelter mentioned in the letter, or the memory of being laughed at in rooms far less elegant than this one. Or maybe he was tired of disappearing to make others comfortable. "I didn't come here to argue," he said quietly. Clara tilted her head. "Then why are you here?" He paused, just long enough to matter. "To see what people do when they think no one important is watching." Her smile faltered, just a fraction. "That's a strange answer." "Truth usually is," Evan replied. Around them, the air shifted. Conversation slowed. Curiosity crept in. People sensed tension the way animals sense weather. Clara straightened her shoulders. "I support this cause very generously," she said, voice projecting now, "which is why I find it frustrating when people who don't belong treat it like entertainment." Evan nodded. "We agree on that." Her cheeks flushed. "Excuse me?" "You should be careful," he continued. "Charity isn't a costume party. It's not meant to make anyone feel smaller." Someone nearby inhaled sharply. Another guest set down her glass. Clara's eyes hardened. "You're lecturing me now?" "No," Evan said. "I'm reminding myself why I stopped coming to things like this." She scoffed. "Then do everyone a favor and leave." The words landed heavier than she intended, or maybe exactly as she intended. Evan considered her, considered the room, considered the years of quiet checks, anonymous transfers, projects launched without his name attached. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the invitation, held it between two fingers. Clara didn't look at it. He slipped it back into his pocket. "Enjoy the evening," he said. And he turned toward the exit. Behind him, the executive director finally spotted him. Her face drained of color. "Wait," she said, too loudly. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. Evan paused, one hand on the door. "Yes?" he asked. She swallowed. "I'm so sorry. We've been looking for you." Clara frowned. "For who?" The director gestured toward Evan, voice trembling now. "Mr. Hale, our primary donor." Silence rushed in, thick, absolute. Clara stared at him. Evan didn't turn back. Not yet.
Evan Hale did not move when Clara laughed again. He had learned long ago that movement invited interpretation, and interpretation invited stories he did not control. So he stayed where he was, near the back wall, hands still folded, posture relaxed enough to look unimportant. People like Clara Whitmore noticed reactions. They fed on them. Silence, on the other hand, made them uneasy. The gala continued around them. Waiters plased with trays balanced like practiced indifference. Laughter rose and fell in rehearsed waves. Someone clinked a glass for attention, then thought better of it. The east atrium had been designed to feel open, but Evan had always believed it functioned more like a stage, everyone visible, everyone waiting to be seen correctly. Clara shifted her weight and glanced at him again. She was close enough now that he could smell her perfume, something expensive and deliberate. She tilted her head slightly, as if reconsidering him, then smiled in a way that suggested generosity rather than apology. "I didn't mean to offend," she said, loud enough for a small circle to hear. "It's just, these events attract all kinds." The people near her laughed softly, the sound cautious. Evan recognized it, the laughter that waited for permission. He met her eyes for the first time, not challengingly, not submissively, just directly. "I know," he said. 2 words, calm, even. Clara blinked. She had expected defensiveness or embarrassment or anger, something she could place. Instead, she got agreement. It unsettled her. "Well," she said, recovering quickly, "as long as you're enjoying yourself." "I am, in my way." He nodded once, politely, and looked past her toward the far end of the atrium, where a series of photographs lined the glass wall, black and white images, a clinic opening, a ribbon cut by hands that weren't manicured, children standing in a line, shoes mismatched, faces solemn. No one was looking at them. Clara followed his gaze, then scoffed lightly. "They always put those up," she said. "Very effective. Makes people feel like they've done something meaningful." Evans said nothing. Clara's smile tightened. "You're quiet." "I prefer listening." "To what?" "To what people say when they think it doesn't matter." She laughed again, sharper this time. "Careful," she said. "That almost sounds like judgment." "Only observation," Evan replied. Someone cleared their throat nearby. A man in a tailored gray suit, older with the look of someone who belonged in boardrooms. He leaned slightly toward Clara. "The program will begin soon. You're scheduled to speak." "Of course," Clara said, straightening. She turned back to Evan. "Enjoy the rest of the evening." "I will," he said again. She walked away without another glance. Evan exhaled slowly, not from relief, from habit. He had not planned to stay long, that had been the truth when he arrived, but now he found himself lingering, watching, listening. Across the room, a young woman stood alone near a column, clutching her clutch like a lifeline. She wore a dress that was trying too hard to belong. Evan recognized that feeling. Near her, 2 men spoke in low tones, their eyes sliding toward her and then away, dismissive. He wondered if she was here because she believed in the cause, or because someone told her this was how progress looked. A server approached Evan with a tray. "Champagne?" "No, thank you." The server hesitated, then nodded, moving on. Evan watched him go, then reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. His fingers brushed the edge of the folded letter, the invitation. He had almost left it at home, almost decided the work mattered more than appearances. But the letter had mentioned the shelter again, the outreach clinic on Maple Street, the one that stayed open late, the one that never put his name on the wall. That was why he was here. The lights dimmed slightly, a subtle cue. Conversations quieted. Clara Whitmore stepped onto the low platform at the center of the atrium. Applause followed her immediately, confident and practiced. She smiled, waiting for it to crest before raising her hands. "Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight." Her voice carried easily. She was good at this. Evan had read about her, built an empire from a family inheritance and sharp instincts. Known for generosity, but only the kind that came with visibility. There were worse flaws. She spoke about impact, about numbers, about change. She gestured toward the photographs Evan had been looking at earlier. "This work," she said, "is only possible because of people like you." Applause again. Evan watched the room respond, nods, smiles, glasses raised. Then Clara said something that made his attention sharpen. "And tonight," she continued, "we have the honor of recognizing a donor who has chosen to remain understated." A murmur moved through the crowd. Someone who believes the work should speak louder than the name attached to it. Evan felt a few eyes drift, curious. Clara smiled. "We respect that choice, deeply." She paused, then added, "But we would still like to acknowledge the generosity that made the Maple Street expansion possible." The shelter. Evan's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly.
Clara gestured toward the side of the platform. "Please join me in thanking—" She stopped. A stagehand whispered something to her. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned, slightly forced. "Apologies," she said lightly. "A small change in order." Evan knew that something had shifted. He straightened just a little. The room waited. And for the first time that evening, Evan felt the weight of being seen approaching, slowly, inevitably. He did not know how Clara would react. He only knew that silence, once broken, could not be reclaimed, and the room was about to learn something it had not expected.
The room did not applaud right away. That pause mattered. It stretched just long enough for curiosity to overtake certainty. Heads turned, people leaned forward without realizing it. The kind of silence that usually belonged to bad news settled briefly over the atrium. Clara's hand remained lifted, frozen mid-gesture. Her smile stayed in place, but it no longer reached her eyes. "Please," she said, clearing her throat, "if our guest would join us." No name. That omission was deliberate. Evan recognized it immediately. When people lost control of a narrative, they avoided specifics. He felt the weight of the letter in his pocket again, heavier now. He could stay where he was, let the moment pass, let someone else step forward and relieve the room of its discomfort. He had done that before. But then he thought of the clinic, of the nurse who stayed late on Tuesdays because funding allowed overtime, of the mother who cried quietly in a hallway because no one had treated her with urgency in years, of work that did not ask to be seen, but still mattered. Evan stepped away from the wall. The movement rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered. Someone else frowned, trying to place him. A few smiles faltered as recognition failed to arrive. He walked slowly, not to perform restraint, but because rushing would turn him into a spectacle. His shoes made no sound on the polished floor. He kept his hands at his sides. Clara watched him approach. Her eyes narrowed just slightly, as if she were recalculating. When he reached the edge of the platform, she leaned toward the microphone again. "This evening," she said, "has always been about humility." Evan stopped below her. He did not look up. "And generosity," she added. A polite laugh followed. She gestured toward him. "Our donor prefers to remain out of the spotlight." That word landed wrong. Evan looked up then. "I didn't say that," he said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The microphone caught it anyway. The laugh died instantly. Clara's lips parted. "Excuse me?" "I didn't ask to remain out of the spotlight," Evan said. "I asked not to be used as one." A murmur spread, sharper this time. Clara recovered quickly. "Of course, what I meant was—" "I know what you meant," Evan said. He stepped onto the platform, standing beside her now. The height difference was negligible, but the proximity changed everything. Cameras shifted, phones came up, discreet but hungry. "I've funded the Maple Street Clinic for 7 years, not because I wanted to feel good about myself, and not because I wanted my name on a wall." Clara's jaw tightened. "We are grateful," she said too quickly. "I'm glad, because gratitude is quieter than praise and more useful." Someone in the front row gasped softly, not outrage, recognition. Evan turned slightly, addressing the room now. "This place," he said, gesturing around them, "is beautiful. It does what it's designed to do. It makes generosity feel elegant." He paused. "But elegance doesn't heal people." The silence deepened. "I came tonight because I was invited, by name, not as a donor,
not as a symbol, just as a person. Clara swallowed. "This isn't appropriate," she said under her breath. He looked at her, really looked. "You laughed at me," he said, "because you thought I didn't belong." Her face flushed. "You didn't." "You did," Evan said, "not unkindly. And it matters, because rooms like this decide who deserves to be heard." The room shifted. Discomfort rolled through it, thick and unavoidable. Clara straightened. "If you're trying to shame me—" "I'm not," Evan said. "I don't need to." That landed harder than any accusation. He turned back to the crowd. "I'm not offended by wealth. I'm not offended by power. I am offended by the idea that dignity is something you earn by looking right." A beat. "I won't be speaking again tonight." He reached into his jacket and removed the folded letter. He held it up briefly. "This invitation was written like a favor, but the work it represents isn't." He placed the letter gently on the podium. Then he stepped down. For a moment, no one moved. Then someone started clapping. One person, slow, deliberate. Another joined, then another. Not applause for a performance, something heavier. Respect, perhaps, or relief. Clara did not clap. She stood rigid, eyes fixed on the letter. Evan walked back through the room. People made space without realizing it. No one stopped him. No one spoke. Near the exit, the young woman in the too formal dress met his eyes. She nodded once. Evan nodded back. Outside, the night air felt cooler, cleaner. He stood for a moment on the steps, letting the noise behind him blur. He had not planned to say any of that. He hadn't even known he could. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He considered ignoring it, then answered. "Yes?" "Mr. Hale?" a voice said, calm, professional. "This is the board chair." Evan closed his eyes briefly. "I think," the voice continued, "we need to talk." Evan looked back at the building. Light spilled from the glass walls. Inside, figures moved, uncertain now. "Yes," he said, "I think we do." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. For the first time that evening, he smiled. Not because he had won, but because something honest had finally entered the room. And honesty, once invited in, rarely left quietly.
The board meeting was scheduled for the next morning. That alone told Evan everything he needed to know. Urgency, when it arrived that quickly, was rarely about reflection. It was about containment. He slept poorly, not from anger, from clarity, the kind that rearranged things while pretending not to. At dawn, he made coffee, packed a simple lunch, and walked the 6 blocks to the transit stop. He could have driven. He chose not to. Motion helped him think. The boardroom was nothing like the atrium, smaller, quieter, built to feel neutral, though nothing important ever was. 7 people sat around the table when Evan arrived, suits in muted colors, faces practiced in listening without revealing. Clara was not there. That absence was intentional. "Mr. Hale," the chair said, standing, "thank you for coming on such short notice." Evan nodded and took the seat offered to him. He placed his hands on the table, still open. "We wanted to address last night," the chair continued. "There has been concern about optics." Evan waited. A woman across from him spoke next. "The gala is a public-facing event. What happened created confusion." "Discomfort," another added. "Damage," someone else said quietly. Evan listened without interrupting. He had learned long ago that people revealed their priorities when they believed they were being reasonable. When they finished, he spoke. "I didn't plan to speak last night. I didn't plan to attend either, but I won't apologize for telling the truth." The chair folded his hands. "No one is asking for an apology. That's good, because I wouldn't give one." A silence followed, not hostile, assessing. "We value your contributions," the chair said carefully. "Your support has allowed us to expand services significantly." "I know. I helped design that expansion." The chair nodded, "which is why this situation is delicate." Evan leaned back slightly. "Delicate for whom?" A pause. "For the organization," the woman said. "For donors, for leadership." "For Clara," Evan said. No one denied it. "She has been instrumental in our visibility," the chair said. "Our presence attracts funding. So does honesty, just not the kind you can photograph." A man at the far end of the table cleared his throat. "She didn't intend harm." Evan met his eyes. "Intent doesn't erase impact." That landed. The chair exhaled slowly. "What are you asking for, Evan?" It was the first time anyone had used his first name. "I'm not asking. I'm informing." He reached into his bag and placed a thin folder on the table. Inside were reports, numbers, projections. "I'm stepping back from public-facing involvement, effective immediately." A ripple of unease moved around the table. "My funding continues. The clinics will not suffer. But I will no longer lend my name to events that mistake performance for service." The chair's brows knit. "This could be interpreted as a rebuke." "It is," Evan said. A long silence followed. Finally, the woman spoke again. "And Clara?" Evan considered the question. "That's up to you." The chair leaned forward. "She feels." "I'm sure she does, but feelings aren't governance." The chair closed his folder slowly. "We'll need to discuss next steps." Evan stood. "Take your time, but understand this." They looked up at him. "I don't fund this work to feel powerful. I fund it because I've seen what happens when people are invisible." He nodded once and left. Outside, the city moved on. Buses hissed. People hurried. None of them knew what had shifted upstairs. That was fine. 2 days passed, then 3. The story didn't break the way scandals did. No headlines, no outrage cycle. Instead, a quiet press release appeared. The foundation announced a review of leadership practices, a renewed commitment to dignity. No names mentioned. Clara issued a statement that afternoon. It was polished, carefully worded, apologetic without being specific. Evan read it once, then closed the browser. He was at the clinic that evening, sitting in a folding chair near the intake desk when the nurse approached him. "She asked for you," the nurse said softly. Evan looked up. "Who?" The nurse nodded toward the hallway. Clara stood there, alone. No cameras, no entourage. She wore a dark coat, simple, unadorned. Evan rose slowly and walked toward her. They stopped a few feet apart. "I wasn't sure you'd see me," she said. "I wasn't sure either," Evan replied. She glanced around. "This place is quieter than I imagined." "That's kind of the point," he said. She nodded. "I wanted to apologize, properly." He studied her face. She looked tired, not performative tired, real. "For what?" Evan asked. She inhaled. "For laughing, for assuming, for using you as a mirror instead of seeing you." Evan waited. "And for making something meaningful feel small." That mattered. "I don't need an apology," Evan said, "but I accept the honesty." She swallowed. "I didn't know." "No," he said, "you didn't want to." She flinched slightly. "That's fair." They stood there, the hum of the clinic filling the space between them. "I'm stepping back," she said, "from public roles for a while." Evan nodded. "That's your choice." "I need to learn how to listen without being centered." "That takes time," Evan said. "I know," she replied.
I'm not asking for absolution. Good, because that's not mine to give. She smiled faintly. You're consistent. I try to be, Evan said. She turned to leave, then paused. You belong in every room you enter, even when no one knows why. Evan didn't respond right away. I know, he said finally. She nodded and walked away. Evan returned to his chair. A mother sat across from him, holding paperwork, nervous, hopeful. Evan smiled at her, reassuring, ordinary. The work continued, and somewhere between quiet choices and uncelebrated truths, the world adjusted its weight. Not loudly, but enough.
The weeks that followed did not feel like resolution. They felt like space. Evan returned to routines that asked nothing of him beyond presence. Morning coffee, clinic visits twice a week, long walks home when the day had been too crowded with other people's pain. The foundation continued its work, quietly, effectively. He noticed small changes first. The intake process at the clinic became simpler, fewer forms, more time. A new sign appeared near the door, not branded, not inspirational, just clear. You will be treated with respect here. He watched people read it. Some nodded, some exhaled. That mattered more than speeches. The Gala circuit moved on, as it always did. New faces, new causes, new headlines. Clara Whitmore's name appeared less often. When it did, it was in smaller columns, articles about restructuring, about accountability, about stepping back. Evan did not follow closely. One afternoon, months later, a letter arrived. Not thick, not formal. Handwritten. He recognized the penmanship immediately. Evan, I didn't expect you to respond before, and I don't expect it now. I only wanted you to know that I've been spending time here, not donating, listening, volunteering where I'm not introduced, where my name doesn't open doors. It's uncomfortable. That's how I know it's right. I used to believe dignity came from control. I'm learning it comes from restraint. Thank you for not rescuing me from myself. Clara. Evan folded the letter once and placed it in the drawer with the others. Notes from patients, drawings from children, receipts for repairs paid quietly. He didn't need to reply. That evening, he walked past the atrium where it had all begun. The glass still caught the light the same way. People inside laughed, toasted, performed generosity. Evan paused only briefly. Then he kept walking. At the clinic, a young man sat in the waiting area, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the floor. Evan recognized the posture, the effort to take up less space than necessary. He sat beside him. First time, Evan asked. The man nodded. I didn't think I belonged here. Evan smiled gently. Most people don't. That's usually why they do. The man let out a small, surprised laugh. Inside, the nurse called the next name. Time passed. Seasons shifted. The foundation published a report at the end of the year, transparent, detailed, uncelebrated. It didn't trend, but funding increased. So did trust. Evan stood in the clinic one afternoon, watching a child color while her mother spoke softly with a social worker. This was the work. Not applause, not redemption arcs, just continuity. He thought of Clara then, not with resentment, not with vindication, with distance and respect. She was wrong. So had he once, in other ways, in other rooms.
People learned when they were allowed to, when they weren't shamed into silence or elevated into untouchability. One night, as Evan locked up the clinic, he noticed a small plaque near the entrance. It hadn't been there before. Dedicated to those who give without needing to be seen. No names. Evan touched the edge of it briefly, then turned off the lights. The city outside moved as it always had, loud in places, cruel in others, kind in moments most people missed. Evan walked home, hands in his pockets, jacket worn but clean. He had never wanted to be known, only to matter. And in the quiet ways that lasted, he did.